the beginning of many video games, the first thing the players ask to do is create their character. From the first moment of the game, there is already much being asked of the player. You must decide how you want to be represented in the game. Games present a unique opportunity compared to other forms of popular media. They traditionally don't ask the audience to explicitly define themselves. Character creation is a tool for self-representation, reflection, and expression. Using the tools given to them, the player can decide on which aspects of their own gender they can bring with them into the narrative. The experience varies based on the player's inputs and the contexts of the game in which they make these decisions. Not only are players actively making sense of their own gender, but they do so in relation to the rules set by the game. Through this process, gender becomes visible, defined simply by the shape of your face and body, the length and style of your hair, and what clothes you're wearing. Your own experience with gender is translated through slider tools. Your existence is found within some combination and configuration of it. Character creation is important. Regardless of how much thought or investment you've put into it, you've made some kind of decision about yourself. We've spoken to some gamers about their experiences with character creation and gender expression. This is what they had to say.
My name's Tim Johns, short for Timothy Johns, and my preferred pronouns are he, him.
Stephen, he, him.
My name is Patrick.
This is Jane Donald being interviewed about video games.
Usually I tend to play sports games. I'm very outdoorsy.
Right now I'm playing Left 4 Dead, anywhere from like first-person shooters to Rocket League. I would say a combination of those two.
I play like strategy games usually, like Total War, Rocket League sometimes. That's pretty much all I'm playing right now, but I've played about everything. Halo, Call of Duty, whatever.
I normally like to play like open kind of like errand games that are like more peaceful, like Animal Crossing or like farming games, or things that kind of like give a sense of just like running errands at a leisurely pace with like cute dialogue. Those are normally the games I'm drawn to.
Sports can be quite limited, especially I'm a huge baseball fan, and one of the biggest problems is in terms of if you were to like kind of separate decades from like, you know, MLB, let's say 2014, 2012 to the present, there's a significant difference, but in terms of like customization, it's limited. You really choose the haircuts the game gives you, the facial hair the game gives you, and it can be a bit limited with character like design.
I think I get a lot of freedom in sort of like, either I get to create whatever I want, or what's already there has something I'm interested in. So for like Left 4 Dead, there's like 3 men to pick from, so I can just pick a guy. Whereas like for someone who does not identify with that gender, they only have one thing to pick from.
If I have the choice to create a character, I will usually just make one modeled after myself, you know? If not, I'll play whatever the protagonist, the game offers up.
I think that when I was younger, I used to kind of like to emulate myself, or maybe more so like what I thought an ideal self was, and that's definitely changed. For instance, like Animal Crossing I played when I was like a kid, and they have been making new versions of it, so I've played it, say like last time I played it was during the pandemic. So I used to, I think, present my character more as hyper feminine when I was younger, and now that I've kind of like come out more with like a gender fluid way of being, I've really like appreciated kind of just like making my character look scruffier, you know, derelict chic.
I think character creation is extremely important because I feel like people need to express themselves very openly, very freely, because the more you express yourself artistically, creatively, the more you have a real good sense, not just a kind of identity, but also, you know, it allows you to put almost your fingerprint on it. It's like a stamp in a way, it's your own personal stamp, because the more you feel like restricted in a way, I'm using like my baseball game as an example, a lot of the characters kind of look very similar to one another, so the more options you have, you can really like customize, you know, your player's appearance, where, you know, it's a lot more like fun and interactive too. So if you're able to change, different hairstyles, it's kind of a bit like cyberpunk, how it's very, imaginative that way. You can have a real cool avatar where it's like very, personal. And that's the important about video games and knowing your audience too. The more you're able to let your audience really, truly, be more expressive, the more, engagement with your audience, the more, kind of successful it's going to be, the more people are going to want to like use compared to being like restricted with other video games like sports games. It's almost like when you create other players, you get to kind of create like their own bio too. So you're setting up their whole backstory. And I find that way more fascinating because, already, if you recreate yourself, it's kind of like you already know your own story. So it's not that interesting. But when you recreate other players, you're almost creating their, a new universe in my, like a new league, baseball league.
I create either something I'm like sexually attracted to, or I create a character of like who I want to be and not myself. So it's never an image of like who I am as a person. I feel quite comfortable identifying as someone who is okay with their masculinity. So I think it sort of makes it easier. Like there's always some sort of like masked man you can pick from out of, if it's like pre-assigned, there's someone in there who's going to be under that definition. And then for creating the character from scratch, I can just turn it into that. Whereas if I identified more as a feminine man or someone who expresses femininity, I would be a lot more of a challenge to like find a character pre-assigned that sort of models that.
What's kind of interesting in terms of like I'm a big baseball, since I'm a big baseball fan, in terms of gender, usually it's kind of funny because I'm not the tallest player. I'm about maybe like 5'10". So when it comes to creating players, I usually create players that are like, much taller. I usually kind of create baseball players that are almost the opposite of me, like very tall, very kind of, in a way bulky too.
I mean, they're very like male or female usually, if you even get the option. So it's not super diverse, but yeah, it's fine for me as a straight guy.
So for Animal Crossing or say Harvest Moon, like there is a gender binary. However, the characters are kind of designed in more kind of like cartoon bubble-ish shapes. So they don't really they just look like young children essentially. You can customize their hair, their attire, and quite a lot of stuff in say Animal Crossing. So if I can give the character kind of like a boyish haircut and like dress them up in a certain like way that I like, that has to do with my own mythical like lore, if you will, like that's entertaining for me. Maybe try out different hair colors, I wouldn't feel like.
Creating either like absolute freedom to make whatever you want. I think Elden Ring did a good job at that. Saints Row, GTA does a good job at that. And then for stuff where it's pre-assigned characters, making sure there's quite a wide variety to pick from. I already quite feel comfortable myself because there's always something I'm looking for. But if I were to think about what would make everyone comfortable, I would say make it as diverse as possible. So for like Left 4 Dead, like why is it only 3 men and 1 woman? Why can't there be an even split or more options?
I mean, I know it's a big controversy in air quotes because gamers are not very progressive people, and games are trying to be more inclusive and adding genders and gender options for people. But yeah, the reality of it is that it's usually been straight white males in most video games, and I think the industry is trying to make a change, and that is a good direction to go in.
Like, I think that there's certain games that have like downloadable content that like users can make themselves. Like I recall Sims had that function, and I think that's really fun and kind of creates like this more agency to like develop characters or avatars that can be really diverse. Sometimes I actually prefer like the lack of options and having it be like an amorphous blob, so I don't have to really think about it. I think it's definitely important. Like I've always liked kind of playing more androgynous characters or characters that have more kind of like a bland appearance or something like this, so I can kind of like cast my own subjectivity on them to some degree. A lot of games that I've been playing in the past little while have been like independent games. So like conceived of one developer. So often they'll be like 8-bit. So really pixelized and hard to differentiate. So I guess I do like that rather than being kind of like given, say, a character I don't particularly identify with. Like,
you know, at the end of the day, we're all very unique in our own way, and it's no one wants to be miscategorized, but no one also wants to be boxed in also. And I feel like in the video games realm, it's very important to kind of, you know, I feel comfortable as myself because it's important to kind of, you know, as a way, if you feel, you know, when you play video games, when you know you're kind of self-best, you're able to be more kind of accommodating and help others, you know, kind of integrate within a gaming community also.